Hello everyone, I'm working in Resolve version 15, Resolve Studio, and I'm in full screen at the moment, Shift F. I'm just coming to the desktop. I'll be switching in and out of full screen mode to give me more real estate to work with the main preview here. So here we have a timeline with some examples, and I'm going to begin with a simple example of just applying particle illusion and a brief tour of the UI. So I have in the Open Effects Inspector here, I have all of the installed plugins available. So I'm going to just go down to the particles unit here, where we find PCC particle illusion, and I'm just going to drag that onto my current node. Now I'm going to Shift F to switch over into full screen mode so I can see a little bit more of my preview. And here we can see in the Effect Inspector the basic layout of the particle illusion as exposed in Resolve. And there's pretty light here on parameters, just the basic parameters for licensing the effects browser with the basic library of presets, not many installed presets. We'll launch into particle illusion to look at the emitters shortly. Basic options like apply modes and transforms for the world, which is effectively the camera through which we see the particle system, and the emitter, which is the particle source. We also have the Moka motion tracker to offset either the world or the emitter, and the pixel chooser, which allows us to pull a key or draw a shape with the Mocha masking and tracking tools. So we'll be taking a look at those as we move to more advanced examples a little bit later. So to see the full set of tools for particle illusion, we launch the particle illusion UI, and that launches in a floating window, and this is the particle illusion UI. This is floating on top of Resolve. I'm going to give you a brief tour of the UI components. Up here, we see the preview window, and below the preview window, we can see the emitter categories. There are over 2,000 emitters shipped with particle illusion. I'm going to twirl open the sampler group, which gives some basic examples. And when I select an example, the real-time preview is launched in the preview window. And as I drag the mouse, you can see that the emitter follows my mouse as I drag around, so we can get an impression of how the emitter will behave when it's moving around the screen. All of the UI panels are scalable. If I move my cursor to a boundary between panels, I can move this around to give myself more real estate for different aspects of the UI. So just to reiterate, this is the preview window. If I go in here and select a preset from the emitters list, then that preset is displayed in the emitter window, in the preview window. Over here is the parameters window. So when I have an emitter loaded, then I can edit the emitter in here. Over here is what we call the stage. And this is the preview over the background, or black if we choose not to use the background, or a single frame. And this is allows us to scrub through and preview our setups in context. And down here is the timeline view, where we can edit the timing of our animations, and it also provides a curve-based view of my animations that are applied to effects. So if I just close the sampler group here, you can see all of the different categories. I'm just going to go through and randomly select some examples here. There's a very wide selection of different emitter types, which provide, as I say, over 2,000 presets. which we can then use as a starting point for getting creative and creating our own customized particle effects. This is a searchable list, as is would be useful with over 2,000 effects to choose from. I kind of know what I'm looking for, so I'm going to search for rain. So if I select this guy, which is fast rain, this is the currently selected emitter, and I want to apply this to the clip preview here on the stage. So there's a couple of ways that I can do this. I can double click here, and this will apply the emitter in its default location, and then a layer is created with this emitter applied. I'm just going to select that emitter and delete it. The other way that I can select an area for the emitter is to select it and drag to plot a rectangle, and that rectangle is placed on the screen. So I'm just going to begin by double clicking to apply the emitter in its default location. You'll notice that the first frame of the clip, there's nothing happening, because the way the preset works is that it evolves over time. So we go here and choose our initial emitter type, add that in, and now nothing happening at frame 1, and it gradually starts to rain. So the first thing I want to do is, because I want to obviously cut to this while the rain is falling, is to take a look at some of the basic properties of the emitter. So this is the layer that contains a single emitter. If I twirl that open, I can see the advanced properties of the overall emitter, and then the individual components of the emitter and their specific properties down here. I'm just going to open the master properties group here. It just gives us the general options like the shape of the emitter, how the order in which the emitters are drawn, and so on. And the important parameter I want to focus on here is the preload parameter. So this is the number of frames I want to advance the effect by. So if I set this to 48, this basically sets the start of the emitter lifespan 48 frames before the start of the clip, which means that the rain is in progress when the clip starts. When I'm editing an effect or an emitter, the parameters can be adjusted on screen with the HUD. If I turn the head-up display off and on, you can see the outline of the emitter area, which I can scale and move around. Note that if I click outside the HUD, basically what I'm doing there is creating another emitter within the same layer. That's not what I want to do at this point in time, so I'm going to backspace to remove that. I'm going to focus on this emitter for the moment. So here we can also adjust the properties without the HUD on. So it's basically the position, angle, and so on for the emitter can be adjusted there. But I'm going to leave the HUD on because I find that useful to work with. So if I'm going to go, if I go down here to the properties of the emitter, I'm going to change, for example, things like the number. So this is how many particles are emitted, the size, and so on, and a whole host of properties which I'm not going to get into at this point in time. I'm just going to back off the opacity a little bit, and I'm going to scrub in the timeline. I can scrub here in the timeline, or I can scrub in the timeline animation view, which I actually find this method a little bit easier, because once we have keyframes on here, we can accidentally move keyframes on the timeline. But if you scrub in the animation window, it avoids that behavior. So we can scrub it either place. So now I have my first layer added. I'd now like to add a second emitter to the same layer. So I'm going to double click here to add a second emitter. And just to avoid confusion, I'm going to go over here, and my first emitter, I can move up and down the priority for drawing. I can also hide that so we can focus on the second emitter that I've just created here. The default shape for this emitter, if we try to open the properties here, is an area, a rectangular area. There are various different types of shape. We can emit it from a single point, which will just give us the one raindrop, which is not particularly useful. Or in this case, I'm going to ask to emit it from a line, and the line is drawn relative to the first point. So if I click now, then it creates a second point. If I keep on clicking, it's going to add additional points to the line. But if I hit escape, then it quits drawing the line, and now I just have a line area where my emitter is emitting outward and inwards. Basically, what I want to do here is create the impression of perspective by having smaller raindrops kind of in the sky in the distant plane. So I kind of want to generate these up to the point where the line begins. So I'll stretch the line across the screen here, and in the properties I can emit up to or after the emitter. So if I turn off emitter out, then my emitter, my rain is basically going up to the line where the emitter is, so basically the line where the sky is. So if I go in here and change the size and increase the number and just change the emission angle a little bit. So now we've got our distant rain here, and if I go and turn on show for my foreground layer, now we've got our two emitters working in a single layer. We can add multiple layers and combine lots of different emitter types within the same particle illusion node, or as we'll see later, we can combine multiple nodes to create a more complex effect. I'm just going to show the main menu bar here. If you are downloading the eval version, you may not have the full set of emitters. As I say, there are over 2,000 of them. If you go to the help page, if you're not seeing all of the huge library emitters that I'm working with here, that's probably because you haven't installed the full emitter set. So if we go to the help page, then we can we have a download emitters link here. That'll take you to the Boris FX website, and we can download the emitter libraries for your chosen platform from here. That's a free download. So just going to tab around to particle illusion once again, and in theory, I've lost my way, and come back down here. So I'm now going to quit particle illusion and save my changes, and then that means I will return back to Resolve, and now we can see in the Resolve UI my rain applied here. Turn the node off and on, you can see before and after. So that's a basic overview of the particle illusion UI. We'll move on to another example now, where we combine a number of different emitter types and look at the transfer modes. So once again, I'll add particle illusion to a node in my tree, Shift F to switch into full screen mode, and launch particle illusion and enter full screen. Just give myself a little bit more real estate to work with. So the goal here is to set some fireworks off in the background. So there's a whole category here of fireworks. So if I twirl that open, you'll see that there are dozens of different types of emitter for different types of fireworks. So I'm looking for a particular type that I tried earlier on. So that's the one that I want to apply. So if I click in the stage, then that point emitter is added at that point in time at that point on the screen. If I pick it up and move it, I can move it around. And you can see in the animation timeline, the start frame for that that particular emitter is at the beginning of the shot. Now I'm a little bit of a way into the shot, and I'm going to choose another emitter preset, and I'm going to tap here, and you can see from the timeline that this is the start point for the second preset. So first firework goes off, and if we select that one, you can see its timeline and its start frame, and here's the second firework, and as we reach that point in the timeline, then it goes off. And this is pretty much like trimming an edit. So if I want this this firework to start earlier, I can just pick up that trim point and have that start a little bit earlier. So it's basically like trimming an edit in your timeline. So I'm now going to pick another preset. This one's got a little bit of smoke in there as well. So I'm going to go midway through the shot and just pick that one up, move that up a little bit. And with this preset selected, I'm going to click here to start that one at that frame. So I've basically got 3 fireworks going off here. So now I'd like to do a little bit of animation. I've just got a window popping up there, all that's saying. I'm just going to quit that back to Resolve and save that. I just saw a window pop up there. I just had to investigate that. I'll launch back into Particle Illusion and take a look at my third firework. This is going off here, and just draw your attention to the animation timeline. So this parameter, for example, the life or the size or the velocity, you can see from the dotted line that there's no animation applied here. Any parameter value which is highlighted in red is indicating that there's an animation. So if I select that, now I can see the animation curve for that parameter. So if I select the number parameter, you can see the number changing over time, and this functions like any typical animation tool. I can pick up points and move them around and basically sculpt the animation by dragging the points. Parameter value in the vertical axis, time in the horizontal. So I'm going to focus on the third firework burst here, one that starts here, and I'm just going to show how to animate a parameter. So what I'm going to do is animate the size parameter. So as the firework just bursts here, I'm going to go to the size parameter, and I'm going to add a keyframe. There's a couple of ways to add keyframes. If I add a keyframe here, you'll see that the keyframe type in this little window here has changed to indicate that it's a linear keyframe. If I tap on there, you can see the 3 basic types of keyframe: linear, Bezier for curved, or constant, which is basically a switch. So now I have a keyframe at that frame. I'm going to set the size to a specific value. So that's my starting size. Now I'm going to move to a later frame, and now I'm going to set another keyframe. So I'll tap in here, add a linear keyframe,
hey,
scroll
Dan.
up. Hello?
Sorry, the screen is bouncing. Can you do the full screen mode? Thanks.
Thank you. Size. And now, as you can see, the size is changing over time. Alternatively, I can just drag in the animation curve window, and you'll see that I'm adjusting the size graphically. So as I scrub through. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if you scrub in the timeline of the stage, you can run the risk of picking these animation points up. This is quite a useful workflow if you want to move the if you're intending to move the keyframes around in the timeline. But this is why I prefer to just go below the timeline to scrub, because that means I don't trip over those when I want to edit them. And if I do explicitly want to offset them, I can pick them up and move them in the timeline. Or if I want to change the parameter value or timing, I can pick up the points on the animation curve here. Now I'm going to jump to a keyframe and change that keyframe interpolation type to Bezier, and now you can see the handles. So I'm going to put a bit of ease into that keyframe by pulling on the Bezier handle to finesse the animation. So this time, instead of exiting from particle illusion from the menu, I'm going to hit the apply button. Basically the same. You're basically applying the effect and then returning to resolve. And if I scrub in the timeline, that's a preview of the animation. Just to point out, this is just a poor little MacBook Pro here that I'm working on, so your mileage may vary in terms of performance if you're on a more robust platform, but media I'm working with here is HD. But as you can see, I'm still getting, even on my little old 5-year-old MacBook Pro, I'm still getting a pretty interactive experience. It's GPU accelerated, so the more robust your graphics card is, the more rapid your processing will be. So I'm just going to come out of full screen mode here and jump to the next example. I'm going to take a look at my timeline. My timeline's got a little gap in it here. So the idea here is that I'm just going to start with nothing, and I'm going to start with a black frame. I'll just insert that into my timeline. So now I've just got a black clip and not an awful lot going on. And the idea here is to use particle illusion to build up a motion graphic from scratch and just create something by combining the emitters together. So once again, I'll switch into full screen mode, launch into particle illusion, and search for the particular emitter that I want to work with. And it's this guy here. So if I double click, that emitter is now added to the stage. I'll drag in the HUD to set the scale and go down to the emitter properties here and increase the zoom, which is going to scale the particles. And I'll just push up the opacity a little bit as well. I'll enter full screen mode. Get a little bit more real estate to work with. And as I scrub, you can see my background plate has got a bit of a texture in it. So now I want to add, my goal here is to create a background here and a kind of graphical background for a lower third. So I'm going to do another search here for another emitter type. This sort of simulates a audio waveform. And this is a line emitter, so if I tap once, then I get the first part of the line, tap again, second part of the line, and so on. If I hit escape, then that finishes drawing the line, and I'll drag the line across just to set the start and end point for that particular emitter. Okay, I've got keyframes in there, so I'm going to repeat that process and do that at frame 1. As I say, if we do it at frame 1 and move up and down the timeline, if I've got auto key on, that can mean that I'm creating keyframes where I don't want to. That's why I always like to leave auto key off and manually create keyframes wherever possible. So I'm going to tap for the first point, tap for the second point, escape to cancel that, and now I haven't created keyframes. So there's my kind of a strap for a lower third, if you like. I'm going to set the opacity, and that's my basic starting point. And what I've done here is composed the entire project within a single layer, within a single node within Resolve, which is kind of compact, but a little bit inflexible in terms of using the native Resolve tools. If I wanted to grade this layer, if I go into the Resolve's grading tools, then if I grade it, then obviously I'm affecting the entire composition. A more flexible way of working would be to break this down into component parts. So what I'm going to do here is hit Command C to copy the settings in this node, Alt S, or just add a new node from the right click menu here. I prefer using the shortcut because it's quicker. So basically now I've got the same effect. When I hit Control V, I basically doubled it up. So I've got basically a duplicate of both of those effects in here. So if I go into go back into Particle Illusion and delete the foreground layer from the first node, and then go to the second node, launch into Particle Illusion, and now remove the background layer. Now I've got the background and the strap. I hit Shift F for full screen in separate layers, which gives me a little bit more flexibility. So I'll select the separate layer and take a look at the compositing style. So this is quite a subtle but important nuance of how the effect is applied. So just the foreground layer is being applied here. If I choose, instead of direct mode, alpha plus apply mode, and then choose an apply mode, as you can see, I've got all of the usual transfer modes, overlay, multiply, add, and so on. And when I select a transfer mode, I can use the slider to mix between the classic direct apply and the selected transfer mode, and also affect the overall opacity of the layer. So this gives us, especially working with pyrotechnics and smoke and atmospheric effects, it gives us the whole load of different options for subtlety of how the effect is applied. So now I'd like to add my foreground layer. So I'm just going to jump back into the timeline, drop another placeholder clip on top, just put another layer into the V2 track of my timeline. Now I'm going to return to Resolve and go back to full screen mode. So basically I've got my bottom layer on here, and this is where I want to put my graphic. So I'm going to just go and search for Continuum Title Studio, where I stored a quick preset of my foreground graphic. As with all of the Continuum effects, we can store everything in Particle Illusion as presets. So there's my foreground, there's my background. And when you're working with Continuum plugins, they generate their own matte. So if I want to key this over this, I can right click on my node output here and say add alpha output. Then I connect the alpha output from my node here. This is using the Resolve native alpha, which none set at the moment. There's no keying or shapes going on in this layer. If I right click in here and say use OFX alpha, then the alpha for the Title Studio effect is used to composite the foreground Title Studio effect over the background where I've applied my motion graphic. So there's a host of possibilities of building up custom backgrounds and custom motion graphics, template graphics using Title Illusion, Particle Illusion, and in this case I'm using Title Studio as well. There's another tool in the Boris FX product family. So I'm just going to go back to searching for Particle Illusion and switch over to the next example, where we're going to take a look at using the integrated Mocha tracking technology to animate our emitters and make our emitters follow the live action. So Shift F to come out full screen mode. I'll drag particle illusion onto my background clip, back to full screen mode, and launch into particle illusion. And there are a whole host of different pyrotechnic effects in the emitter library. The one that I'm looking for is this guy. So,
hey Dan, sorry, the full screen mode again.
Oh, thank you. So there's my emitter that I want to apply to my composition. I'm just going to double click on that to put it in its default position. I'm not going to worry about positioning it or setting it up here because I have a range of controls within the host to allow me to adjust the position and so on, including a motion tracker. So I'm going to go and take a look at those. So in the inspector here, we have access to a range of transforms for the world and the emitter. I like to think of the world as the camera through which we're seeing the scene. So if the whole scene is moving, as the camera sees it, then we would want to reposition or animate the world. If the emitter is moving, then we want to animate the emitter, and then the things that it emits stay in the world, either in a static world or a moving world, and the source, as you think of a candle flame or a hose spouting water, that moves around independently of it. In this example, I'm just going to work with the world emitter. So with the world emitter, when I've enabled transforms for the world, I twirl open the world transforms here, and now I can set the scaling. And there's I think you see the little crosshair icon on here. I can pick it up and move it, and change the aspect and so on. And the rotation, the idea here is to have some flames coming out of the exhaust on this muscle car here. I'll change the transfer mode. I'll choose screen that on. Screen's always good for pyrotechnics. Back off the opacity a little bit, and that's kind of the starting point for where I want to go with this. But obviously the car's moving, so I'll need to track the motion. I'll just close the world transform options here, and we'll see a couple of instances of the integrated Mocha technology. The Mocha motion tracker, which allows us to use a planar shape to control the offset of the world or the emitter, and as we'll see shortly, the Mocha pixel chooser that will allow us to animate and track a mask to hold back the effect. We'll look at that in the next example. So I'll twirl open the Mocha motion tracker and hit Mocha motion tracker to launch the Mocha UI in a floating window. So in the Mocha UI, we have the offsets for the different elements of the particle system. I'm not interested in animating or seeing the emitter. I'm just going to animate the whole world of the particle system. So I'll turn off processing for the emitter, and I'll turn off visibility for the emitter. I'm going to hit Z and drag here, and X to pan, so we can see our world center. So this is the center of our particle system. It's where the particles emanate from. And then the tracker search area is like a circular area which will measure a planar track and interpret that into a point track to reposition that. So we can put this anywhere on the same plane as what we're trying to track, and then its motion will be applied to the offset point. So I'm just going to stick it in the middle there and begin tracking. I'm at the start of the clip. I'll hit the track forwards button, and then the tracking will commence. Again, this is GPU driven, so depending on your host platform, you may have a more rapid processing time than what I've got on my little MacBook here. So now that I've completed tracking, if I scrub through in the Mocha UI, you can see that I've successfully tracked the center point for my particle world. So if I save that, save, and exit back and scrub in the timeline, you can see that my flames are now following the tracker as required. So this is using the motion tracker to offset the origin of the particle system. In the next example, we're going to look at using the Mocha pixel chooser. So my goal here is to, not for any particular reason because it breaks the laws of physics, but put the aurora borealis in this beach. I don't know where this is, Hawaii, but it's certainly not somewhere where you'd normally expect to see the aurora, but that's my goal. So I've added particle illusion here to this node, and I'll go into full screen mode, launch into particle illusion, and search for the aurora emitter. So this is the guy that I want. I'll double click on that, and once again this is starting from nothing. As you can see, it gradually evolves. So what I want to do here is to set the preload frames so that comes to life before the start of the clip. So now you can see the aurora is in progress. If I change the zoom parameter, we'll make that a little bit bigger, and I'll pick up the emitter source and just place that where I want it and hit apply to apply that. And now that's applied over the whole of the clip, which obviously is not what I want. I just want it in the sky here. So if I hit Shift F, go back to normal mode again. Obviously I could use the resolve qualifiers here to maybe try and pull a key on the sky, but this is quite a tricky shot because it's all pretty much the same color. So that might not be the best strategy. Also, drawing a freehand mask with Resolve's masking tool could prove a little bit laborious, so I'm going to choose an easier option, and I'm going to use the Mocha masking tool. So under the pixel chooser, we can use a combination of the Mocha mask, and if needs be, we could use the integrated keyer, which gives us a little bit more control. We can key off multiple colors, and we've got a lot of finessing controls for the keyer in here as well. But I'm not going to use the keyer. I'm just going to draw a shape in Mocha. So my pixel chooser mask is going to be generated from not one of the presets, but from a Mocha spline. So now within the pixel chooser group, I'm going to launch Mocha mask track. So now I can draw obviously presets in here. I can draw freehand shapes, so I could laboriously draw around that if I felt like spending a lot of time, but there's an easier approach that I can adopt, and this is new for the current version of Continuum 2019, and this is this cool magnetic spline tool. So if I select this, I'm going to tap once with the mouse and just move over here. Okay, so I haven't drawn that shape. Mocha has drawn that shape for me. It's basically edge detecting the high contrast edges and automatically drawing a spline based on that detection. Massive time saver for Roto. So now I've got a shape which I can track. So if I toggle the map view on and off, you can see where my my matte area is. I'm going to choose the parameters that I want to track. So in this case, I just want to track the translation, the rotation, because it's a free moving camera. I can set the number of pixels used, turn that up for greater accuracy or turn it down for greater speed in this case, and begin tracking forwards. So the camera's kind of locked off for the first part of the shot, but it starts to move a little bit later. Again, your mileage may vary in terms of processing speed if you have a more powerful GPU than I've got on my little MacBook. So basically the motion Mocha planar tracker is now analyzing the motion of this whole plane and translating that into translation, scale, and rotation keyframes for that shape. If I just turn on the matte overlay, I'll scrub, you can see where the matte's working. Once I've measured the track, then I can pick up any of the points. I can readjust the shape, and that will follow the track that I've measured. So I just want to affect the sky. So if I go to the currently selected layer properties here and invert the shape, now I've got a matte for the sky. So if I hit Save Project in Mocha and exit from Mocha, now the Mocha mask has applied the particle illusion effect just in the area of interest. It's very accurate. In fact, probably just a little bit too accurate because you've got a very sharp edge. I'd like to have a little bit of bleed over these edges. So if I go down to the pixel chooser mask part of the effect inspector, I can add a little bit of feathering. So if I do that here in context, you'll see that bleeds over a little bit. If I show the matte, I can show the feathering, the actual matte. So just put a little bit of soft edge on there so that that's not too sharp now. It just bleeds over a little bit and sells the effect a little bit better. So in the final example, I'm going to put both of those techniques for tracking the emitter and the Mocha masking together in a single example. So I'll apply particle illusion here, switch to full screen mode. So my goal here is to set the tank on fire. So I'm going to approach this in a slightly different way to the previous examples. I'm going to start tracking straight away and then launch particle illusion a little bit later. So I'll twirl open the motion tracker, enable emitter transforms, because I'm going to be generating flames and smoke. So I want the source of the flames to be attached to the tank turret here. But then obviously once the flames and smoke are free of the tank, then I want them to remain in this world where the camera is locked off. I don't want them following the tank. That wouldn't look realistic. So I've enabled transforms for the emitter. So I'm going to launch the Mocha motion tracker. In this case, I'm going to ignore world offsets because it's a locked off camera. I'll put my emitter in its desired position. And as I scrub the timeline, if I was to try to track that, I'd have a problem, both because the actual the barrel of the tank gun is going to get in the way, and also because of the smoke that's occluding the area that I'm tracking. So in this example, I'm going to choose a different area, which is roughly coplanar to the area that I want to track. It's got some good high contrast detail in it, and the information in this area will be used to offset the emitter in my desired position. So if I begin tracking, you'll see my emitter is marked here in blue, and when the barrel swings in front of it, it's not going to be disturbed by that. So now I'm going to save the Mocha project and return to Resolve. And now I'm going to jump into particle illusion and choose a preset. So I kind of know what I'm looking for. So I'll search for it, and that's what I want to apply. If I double click, that's automatically applied to the tracker that I've already measured. So I can just jump in here and fine tune the emitter size and angle and so on as required. And then that will follow my tracker. I'll hit apply and return back to resolve. Jump in and change the compositing style. Once again, I'll change that to screen, which always works well for pyrotechnics. Back off the opacity a little bit and scrub to preview the result. So it's kind of there, but if that's supposed to be behind the barrel of the gun, that's not too convincing because as you can see, that swings in front of it. So I need to mask that barrel of the gun, and that's where the Mocha pixel chooser comes in. So I'll launch Mocha Mask Track. I've already tracked my points for my emitter, so I'm going to turn off processing on that. I'll hit Z and drag to zoom in and park on a frame where my target is clearly defined. So it's a general rule of tracking. You always want to begin your tracking from the frame where your target is clearest in vision. I mean, in this case, I want to track forward and backward. So this time I'm just going to draw a simple X-spline shape around the gun here. And then when I've finished plotting points, I right-click the mouse to finish and close the shape. So I'm going to select all the points here and go to the edge properties and set a negative softness and set that so that that blends in a little bit. So if we zoom right in, you can see that's got a bit of a soft edge. So this case, in this example, I'm not feathering externally in Resolve. I'm actually applying per edge softness here, so we can get a lot more finessed about softening our shapes. So I'll just zoom out here. So I want to begin tracking this. So I'm going to turn up the number of pixels used because this is a very small, badly defined area, and I'm going to turn on perspective to track the perspective of that motion as well. And now I'll hit track forward. And as you can see, despite all of the issues with that, that's tracking pretty well. If at any point I want to jump in and set keyframes for the roto, I can just select either the entire shape or individual points and move those around to add a layer of roto animation on top of the tracking. Now I'll track backwards to the start of the shot. At any point I can jump in there and just massage the shape, and then this new shape area is corrected, and then it will use that new area to derive the tracking information on subsequent frames. So if I turn on the matte overlay, crank up the opacity, you can see I've got a pretty accurate mask for the barrel of the gun there that I want to protect. I want to affect everything but the barrel of the gun. So if I go to this layer and invert it, so the white shaded area is where my effect is going to be. So I'll save that and return back to Resolve. And now, as you can see, when the barrel swings in front of the flames there, they're occluded, and that looks a little bit more convincing than the flames being in the wrong place. I'm just going to go and turn the pixel chooser off and on so you can see before and after I applied that. I might just go in here and just add a soupçon of feathering just to blur the edge off a little bit. So just to summarize what we've been seeing during this session, I'll go right back to the initial example. In the first example, we just looked at applying a couple of emitters over the entire clip. And the next example, we went a bit deeper and looked at animating our emitters, having emitters starting at different points in the timeline and animating the emitter properties. In this third starburst here, I animated the size of the particles so that they got bigger over time. The next example, I created a stylized motion graphic by combining a couple of emitters and then dropped a Continuum Title Studio preset on top of that to finish it off. Then we looked at animating the position of our world and our emitters by using the integrated Mocha motion tracker, using the integrated Mocha pixel chooser to isolate a region of interest, in this case the sky, using the powerful magnetic shape tool that automatically detects edges, cuts down on the amount of manual roto we need to do. And finally, we put all of that together in this example where we track the position of our particle emitter and then held it back with the Mocha mask. That's just been a very brief dip into the vast possibilities of Particle Studio. I think we've got a little bit of time left over for questions if anyone has one.
Okay.
I'm going to hand back to Jessie now. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Dan. That was awesome. Before I hand it off to Peter to answer questions, I just want to announce the winners of our VFX prizes. Congratulations to Ido Lockman, who has won the 1-year subscription to Continuum. Congratulations to Laura Lopez, who has won the 1-year Sapphire subscription. And congratulations to Ray Heath, who has won the 1-year Mocha Pro subscription. You'll each be receiving emails from me shortly. Peter, you want to jump on and answer questions?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dan, for a wonderful presentation. Really very, very in-depth view of particle illusion for us instead of resolve. So I answered a ton of questions in the background. I'm going to cherry pick a couple of them that I wanted to talk about and a couple of little quick tips for you guys. So start with the tips. One quick tip. If you were to type a double colon in the search field inside of particle illusion, what you will see is a listing of what we consider to be the best of the best emitters. This was personally vetted by Alan Lawrence, the original creator of particle illusion, back before it was anything but a particle illusion from the Wonder Touch company, which was, of course, eventually acquired by Generalis, which was eventually acquired, of course, by Boris FX. So that's a cool little thing. You can see Dan is showing that right now, and Alan picked out these emitters because he really felt this represented the best of the emitters that he's seen over the decade plus in working in this product and developing it from scratch, actually. Another little tip that we'd like to show you is there's a preferences pane, and inside the preferences pane there's an option for clicking in the stage to add emitter or not. This can be really useful if you're trying to reposition an emitter that is kind of like you want one emitter to be right next to or right on top of the other emitter. You can't click to add to the stage in this case, so you disable that. You can duplicate it, then you can shift it easily without without getting the wrong result or the unexpected result. So it's a great little feature. I'm constantly turning this on and off depending upon what I need for that time. What I'd like to next is just a quick chat about some of the features that are in progress here, which we cannot show you right now, but I can talk about them without letting the cat all the way out of the bag before our NAB show. So I encourage everybody here, if you can, come to see us at NAB. If you're planning on being at the show, absolutely, we are a must-see at that show. We've got so much to show this year. It's an amazing movie, more powerful than we've had in many years, and it's always a powerful show for us. So what are some of the new features? Like fully editable emitters. You'll be able to change the sprite that you're using in any preset emitter yourself. Some other things that are really important, this ties in with one of the questions that I had was, let's see, who was it that asked about that? It was Nathan Morgan. Nathan, you asked about a way to apply positional data to particles that have already been created or born. So the answer to that is the use of forces. So forces are not in the current version, but they are actually fully developed. So we have that working in-house, and we're going to be releasing that in the next update, and we will be showing this at NAB. So forces can be, so for instance, it could be a wind force, okay, like a wind will push dust particles in one direction or another, so you're going to have that force. You're also going to have attractors. So attractors would be, say, a line that would have an interaction with the particle. So if a particle is shooting from left to right across the stage and it encounters the attractor line, it'll either hold to that, it'll fall down or disappear when it hits that, or it can bounce back off of that. So there's a lot of different interaction with the forces. So let's see, gosh, I had a lot of questions about GPU support. So one thing I would say is that just like the rest of the Continuum filters, particle illusion is really agnostic when it comes to the use of a GPU. So you can use pretty much any GPU on any modern system and achieve real-time speed with particle illusion. So you don't necessarily have to have an NVIDIA card or an ATI card. Either or will totally work. See, another question in here that just arrived in from Dennis Wiener was, is there a way here to hear audio from the timeline when the particle illusion interface? Not sure about that, but one thing we are doing, another new feature that we've added in, which we cannot show, but we can talk about, is the beat reactor. So beat reactor is a way to create audio-driven visual effects. It's a Continuum exclusive. So it's integrated into many filters in Continuum, as well as being a standalone keyframe generator in the After Effects version of Continuum. But in every version, you can generate audio-driven visual effects just by importing an audio file, an AAI file, or host audio if you're in After Effects, and using the dynamics of that sound file, let's say a drum kick or like a twang of a guitar or a splash of a cymbal, anything like that can drive the particles. So you'd be able to like drive the size or the opacity or how the particles are going to react in the scene based on audio file, which is absolutely amazing when you see it happening. So I got to wrap up now, but that's about that's just yet another reason to come to see it at NAB. So we're at SL 7620 for those of you that are coming there. My name is Peter McCauley. I'm going to be there. I'm the Senior Product Manager at Boris FX. I'll be showing this and more at our booth. And we have like tons of guest presenters coming in. It's going to be a great show. So thanks to Dan for a wonderful presentation and for Jesse for organizing and putting everything on. And for all you folks for attending our demonstration today.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.